going to be live. It's live right now. Gonna make sure you say all the most heinous stuff immediately before pressing the button, just to get it out of your system.
Push the button.
That is hands down my favorite episode I've ever done. Like it pales in comparison to anything else. That was so much fun.
Incredible.
I don't know if you saw there was, and these are classic engagement posts, but it was some infographic that said write a three-word horror story, and immediately I said to the group chat, just push the button. the 3-word horror story.
Speaking of bio-Leninism.
Yeah, really. So we're not here to just go back over by bangers. We're actually here because one, it's fun to do our sort of unofficial live shows, but also because you and I have spoken about this in other contexts, but about this sort of, I guess you could say, like reflexive self-sabotage that you see certainly in the 2A movement, but in kind of conservative America writ large, which is the idea that, well, if they're doing it, or if they're doing it, I can't do it back to them because it would set this sort of precedent. I need to treat them as I would want to be treated. This golden rule, which certainly applies in an interpersonal sense. It's how you should, treat your friends and family. But in a political struggle such as ours, it clearly is not working. It clearly doesn't lead to anything. So I thought I'd share a tweet. And this tweet, by the way, was the entire genesis for this conversation. I read it, got really mad, and then sent Karl a text at, I think, like 8 p.m. that basically said, what are you doing? When can you do a live show? So this is by a YouTuber, Flesh Simulator, who I don't follow, but he's done some good stuff. And I know in particular, he had just found, some of the work on the, the CRA has been, on a journey. So I don't want to blast this guy, even if I do want to blast this idea. So he's reacting to a post from the New York Post, a suspected Antifa professor who compared feds to Nazis arrested in Chicago after bringing a loaded gun to an anti-ICE protest. Responding, Flesh Simulator, all you Rittenhouse stands better be just as up in arms about this guy. Self-defense is a human right, and it's reasonable to think you might need to defend yourself at a chaotic protest. So look, this in particular is not so objectionable, right? This is an idea you've heard many places, but I think it is important to address because this is a loser's mentality. I'll throw it to you, Karl.
Yeah, and I do want to point out for everyone out there, I would love to excoriate this guy, but he also did follow up by saying, okay, never mind. He brought a loaded gun onto federal property after threatening to kill government employees. You probably ought to expect to be arrested for doing that. And he basically said, I was wrong about this. But still, we're addressing the sentiment, which is something that you see constantly. Another one that you'll see is that's the example of this mentality, which is, well, they'll do it to you. Well, you shouldn't crack down on your enemies because when they have power, they'll do it to you. Hey, person of questionable, sexual orientation. They already do that all the time. I don't
think it's up for question. I think normally it is quite obvious.
Yes. Yeah. They do that all the time. So yeah, this is a mentality that we need to smother with a pillow, metaphorically, within our own souls when it comes up in you. When you say, hey, Don Quavius has a Switch and a Wish.com sound suppressor that he bought for $7 from China. He will not ever have the ATF come after him for it. I should be able to own a Wish.com Switch and suppressor. So, he doesn't have a felony and he even has a carry permit. It's because he hasn't been caught for felonies yet. So Don Quavius is not carrying this weapon to defend himself from thugs. He is a criminal who's engaging in criminal activity. and you're the target of it. And so basically doing this whole like, I wouldn't want the law applied to me, and so you shouldn't apply the law to these guys. They're already not applying the law to these guys. Like, you're going to be crushed by multi-agency task forces and do 25 years and be asked to turn all your friends over. Well, he'll do like 4 months in county jail, and he won't catch federal charges because, you know, sometimes it be do like that or whatever.
Yeah, there are a couple things there. You saw a very similar reaction when Trump sent the National Guard into DC.
Yeah, good
because
point.
one of the things that came up is that they were prosecuting people for illegal guns rather. And of course, you have all of your usual suspects out in arms saying like, "Oh, you know, this is outrageous. If we understand the Bruin decision, they should be allowed to own guns in DC." I know a little bit about this, being the a resident gun guy in the group. As I'm sure you're aware, Karl Dahl, when things get tough, you start to get questions.
Yeah.
Like, oh, hey, how can this thing that, in normal circumstances I am morally opposed to and am, assured is sort of a totemic evil. Well, things have changed. Things have got a little dicey. Where can I get a gun? Right. Immediately. And it is very difficult to get a gun legally in DC. There's all these different things you have to jump through. There's every restriction you can imagine. Effectively, it is not for normal people. Look, I'm not going to say that people who live in those areas are not illegally carrying to protect themselves. It's actually funny. The one flesh simulator video I have seen that's pretty funny is his like vision deleter, right? His non-firearm self-defense product that's like a flash
funny.
bulb that basically just burns your corneas out. And I think, as far as I understand, he's like, yeah, I developed that when I was living in an area where I couldn't carry a gun, so I just have that in my car. So
that's wild.
Came off, I just burn their corneas, which, fair enough. I guess that's kind of cool. But we've got to understand that's not who we're talking about here.
Correct.
The National Guard is not roughing up young professionals who have grandpa's 38 special in their coat pocket. I mean, is that a conceptual possibility? Yes. But also, like, come on, guys. We don't live in a fair, equally applied system. We don't live in a country where rules are equally enforced. The other party has decided to vacate that. And look, you can have mutually agreed upon rules of combat. You can regulate that. There have been times when even hard-fought combat would be ritualized and regulated. Cultural limits were put on it. And obviously, politics is war by another mean. The same thing can happen. But once that sort of sacred bond has been broken, once you have cheated enough times, well, it all goes out the window. All of the old limitations put on it. The general assumptions people could count on. Well, dude, those don't exist anymore. You vacated that. And the idea that you can recreate that by simply acting, unilaterally, as if that were the case, acting as if everyone were, respectable. And then your enemy, who's in the process of, shanking you in the back, will say, oh yeah, I guess we should be honorable and fight like men. That's not how it works.
Not at all.
It's especially frustrating because we've seen this over and over and over again, that this is not a reciprocal understanding of how politics works. When you have one party that views it as existential and the other that views it as limited, well, that's a trend line that only goes one way. And so the idea, right, that you should, when you are in power, when you are in a position, artificially limit yourself in the way you wish your opponents were limited. Like, look, man, that only leads one way. If you were limited, they are not. If they, exploit their power to the nth degree, they go after political opponents, they throw people in jail, they deploy a friend-enemy distinction, and you are, operating by, Robert's Rules of Order. Well, guess what, bud? You are going to lose. Clearly, you are going to lose. Curious, do you have anything to add to that, Karl?
Here's an example. They're assuming their mentality somehow ignores all those points that you've just made, the reality, the awareness that they've come to over the past several years, right? And they picture this like good faith engagement coming back from their opponents. And the best illustration of this, I was just telling Mr. Dr. Burden before we started recording or streaming, I should say, that I am rereading Samuel Francis's Anarcho-Tyranny essay, and like I read it when it first came out because I'm old. It was published before Jay was born. I was 18 years old when it came out. So as I hobble over to my my typing chamber with my walker, I was thinking about this because I just finished reading it, and there's a bunch of funny assumptions baked into that article, which I broadly agree with, but a fair bit of the criticisms that I have are exactly what we're talking about, where it's, oh, well, this is a double standard. And, the explanation of anarcho-tyranny in summary is, rules for thee, but not for me, or, we'll tyrannize reading between the lines is it's, like white people, right? While letting like street criminals go wild, and then the judiciary permits all this stuff. And he's talking about the crime bill and decrying like these harsh sentences and death penalty for all these classes of crimes. And Samuel Francis's point is that, well, you should have the death penalty for Don Quavius, robbing an old lady and killing her, or maybe even knowing Sam Francis, maybe even the fact that Don Quavius is robbing this old white lady. But then he decries these penalties for these special people, and the purpose of doing them was so that the judiciary didn't let Don Quavius out or give him like a 3-year sentence or a 5-year sentence that is vacated like we see now. Like that was the whole point. And the passage of the crime bill, which I was opposed to because of the gun control elements of it, which took away fun stuff from us. The gun control part wasn't the issue. It was the criminal control part that was wildly successful. And I'm very comfortable saying that because the world of the late 80s and early 90s in cities, even in suburbs that were, let's say, less demographically advantageous for your average person, it was wildly different. Like you could walk around in areas that were borderline, dusky, at night in 1999, and it wasn't a problem because Don Quavius was in jail, and was in jail probably until the 2010s, which is wonderful. And it's better than the alternative that we got, which is let them all out because it's racist to, apply quote unquote double standards to where like a guy with no criminal record is carrying, is easily issued a carry permit to carry a pistol. So he's carrying a pistol. There's no like theoretical like, well, then everyone should be able to carry a pistol because when they, libertarian argument hat on, when he gets out of jail, he did his time and he served his time and his penalty to society. And so like he should be allowed to carry a pistol because it'd be unfair otherwise. And don't we all have the same civil rights? No, we don't, because his behavior shows that he can't be trusted with it.
Well, and again, it's this idea of, it's this concept of framing your pet issue in your enemy's framework. This idea that, well, this is something that I am passionate about, the right to my own self-defense. So if I couch that in the language of civil rights, if I couch that in the language of the people who won, which is your enemies, well, then they will have to respect it. They will have to recognize that I have used the same, jutsu that they did. Guess what? No, they don't.
Yes,
Clearly,
correct.
they don't care.
They
And
don't
so
engage in good faith.
Exactly. And so, look, that isn't that abnormal as far as politics goes. But you have to understand that, you're not going to reason your way out of this. And weirdly enough, the, the 2A movement has actually gotten this pretty well as regards lawfare.
The real people, yeah, the real serious people, correct, but not your average like dork on X or whatever.
Exactly. And I mean,
although the winds are blowing in that direction, which is heartening.
Certainly, but look, let's be honest. By any reasonable reading of the law, a pistol brace is a short-barreled rifle.
I agree.
Your networky is a machine gun. Let's just be honest here. We know what we're doing.
Yeah.
But we've also realized that if we act within the spirit of the law, if we are, ideal good citizens who comply with everything and don't make trouble, we don't get to do anything fun. We don't get to have the things that we want. So we need to be a little bit unreasonable. Right? We need to be irritating and difficult to deal with. Effectively, you need to wage lawfare. That is the way that you win. And I think that is a pattern that the broader right needs to understand and needs to learn. That the biggest right wing, if we can understand that context, or that in the broadest possible context, victories have come. One in, I would say, abortion and guns. Abortion, that was top down, right? Okay, we understand that top down power is important. Go for it. Now, that said, it's sort of difficult to wave a magic wand and say, all right, I am now the president and in charge of Supreme Court nominations. Like, if you can do it, great. That's not really an actionable plan for people like you or me, Karl.
No.
But on the other side, guns has basically been like a 30-year career of just really being annoying, right? Of suing the crap out of people constantly, coming up with retarded, convoluted arguments to tie your opponents in legal knots and get them to the point where it's easier for them to just capitulate. Just do whatever you want. Be like, fine, whatever. Just leave me alone. Fine, you can have this.
Malicious compliance with the law. Like, well, this doesn't violate the actual words used in this law, and dragging it through the courts if you have enough money. Like, literally, that's how they do it. Is they find a niche and they challenge it that way. And there's all kinds of legal strategies for all kinds of things. And once you get these precedents, the ball really starts rolling. That's how you have concealed carry in almost every single state in America at this point, when you had very few before. And let me clarify, Mr. Dr. Burden. In the old days, a gentleman carrying a pistol was going to be given leeway, even if he didn't have a permit, in many, many, many places. But it was an excuse to arrest a scrote. That's not the case anymore, which is why you have this licensure, schema, because of just rule of law and judicial combat, essentially, that's taken place over many, many years. Like, it's so we have to have all these old arguments all over again. And there was never this time when nobody was allowed to carry a gun, unpermitted. And, we know all these things if we know the history of these laws. And then also the other thing that you have to keep in mind is that the gun control people, there's two elements to it that I think the 2A people get wrong. And we can apply this to everything, right? We can apply this to all legal structures that are in place currently. There's an element of people that want to just ban civilian ownership of guns, so that they can run wild on you, so they can have, lefties run wild on you, or because they're stupid and they think that crime will go away. There literally are people that think that way, but most of them it's because they're basically Bolsheviks and they want to crush you. They don't want you to have guns so they can crush you.
Well, this is an interesting comparison. I realize the world's most irritating libertarians in the world love to compare getting rid of anything to prohibition.
Yeah.
And I'm not making that argument. Obviously, it is entirely possible to have a country that says no fentanyl or like no crocodile and enforce that law, and it will be largely successful. But the reason I'm bringing up this comparison between banning guns and banning alcohol is that I think part of it is from the same impulse. So you mentioned that there are people dumb enough to believe if we get rid of guns, crime will go away. So two things there. One, and anyone who knows anything about guns understands this, the type of guns they ban are never the ones actually used in crime, right? Like the kind of things, Karl, that you and I are interested in are just kind of out. They're wildly impractical for robbing a liquor store.
But they're really good for, stuff that's that they're really.
I think
with.
Yes, it's for stuff. But the idea that if you get rid of guns, these kind of like evil totems, that crime will go away is the exact same thing you saw with prohibition. I was at George Bagby's Telegram group, and he was posting about this, that there were a number of municipalities that actually sold their jails after prohibition because they assumed, all right, we banned alcohol. Crime is done. We don't need a jail anymore. Like we did it, Reddit. Look, you don't exactly have to be an advanced scholar of American history to know that it didn't work like that. Getting rid of alcohol did not end crime. And so there's certainly some of that as well. Just this is kind of like absolute naivete about the subject. But I mean, the desire to legitimately leave people defenseless. I mean, this is what you've seen in certainly the Kyle Rittenhouse case, as mentioned by Mr. Simulator himself, but also in the Daniel Penny case, where no weapons were involved. But even just using your limbs, martial arts, if you will. Well, if that is used in an inappropriate manner from the perspective of our regime, if that's used against one of their clients, well, guess what, bud? You're up for federal prison. And it is clear that, going back to this assumption of good faith, this idea that, well, our opponents are acting reasonably. That's not the case, clearly, because it is not like what he did by any reasonable interpretation of the law is entirely legitimate, right? It is simply a Schmittian friend-enemy distinction.
Exactly.
Daniel Penny is an enemy. Whoever that guy he choked was a friend. We've got a few super chats. This is a live stream, so if you do have questions or comments, you can pay me and I will read them out. We've got a few backed up from Infernal. Who is the best band of our time and why is it Linkin Park? I find that untrue and offensive. You're of the age to have a strong opinion about that.
How
What
dare
do you
you
think about Linkin Park?
I begrudgingly liked them, and then now I just unironically kind of like them. Like they have a couple bangers.
Yeah, I won't fight you on that. There's some
Chester, like I have vast sympathy for him. He is, would have been equally as old as I. I feel those sympathies, but I have to admit it. They have some bangers, and yes, I still listen to some of their songs regularly, but I never owned an album, never went to a show, and in that era, I never would have said that I liked them publicly.
Honestly, like, one step closer is kind of like, the more I'm thinking about this, I can't even fight you. But like, there is a time and a place for that sound. And honestly, this is the right weather for it too.
It's screaming,
a little cold outside.
It's screaming everything you say to me. Like, is like always a go-to text when you're furious about some news article that Jay Burden forwards you. So I'm going to do that from now on, man.
Well, look, if we're talking about sort of shameful bangers, this is a little bit after your time, but that first My Chemical Romance album, When the Mood Is Right.
How is that after my time? I saw that tour, dude.
It's funny. I want you to know, Carl, it is literally any Gen X person. Like,
I went with
making fun of
I went
Ron.
with two Korean guys. It was great. I worked at a Korean company, and they're like, "Do you like My Chemical Romance?" I'm like, "Hell yeah, let's go!"
I am not going to say My Chemical Romance in a South Park Asian accent, but think about how funny it would be if I did.
Romance.
Sorry. Herb's saying for 5. Carl, I see you on the timeline getting holly jolly, but we haven't even. I'm not reading that out. Haven't even had Thanksgiving yet. Me and my turkeys are getting upset. Yeah, the seasons just don't exist anymore.
I am a founding member and spiritual leader of the Legion of Saint Nicholas. That is part of my military orders uniform. The Santa hat stays on. The Phrygian cap stays on year round.
uh, this is a reference that literally no one will get. But Kirk Cameron of made this movie, Kirk Cameron Saving Christmas, which I have seen. It's not very good. It's sort of exactly what you'd expect from like mid 2000s evangelical cinema. But there's a very funny segment in it where it's talking about the real Saint Nicholas, who is not Catholic in this retelling, which makes it sort of weird, is like a muscled up Viking, and he has a dubstep fight in a medieval tavern, and it's very embarrassing. You should not watch it. But that is one modern retelling of Saint Nicholas. And then Lou Templar, Mr. Dr. Burden, the Vision Deleter scales per the eye chart.
Ah.
Yes. And Sturker ban female athleisure wear. I agree. I'll be honest. I find myself more and more in sympathy with the Ayatollah on this matter. I don't go to a public gym anymore. I've been at a private gym for a while now, which means I exclusively work out by myself. It's great. I'd highly recommend it. But look, like I'm a an Anglo Protestant. We're sometimes characterized as a little bit prudish. I consider myself just normal, but yeah, it's weird. It's very weird. It's like I do not want to see anyone, much less some random stranger, doing that in that pose. And look, as much as we make fun of women for this, male bodybuilders are just as bad.
Oh, yeah,
dude. I do not want to see you practicing your glute spread. That is a real bodybuilding pose. In tights at 6 a.m, dude. That is thoroughly inappropriate. Bodybuilding is the gayest sport. That's my conclusion to that.
Well, it literally is. Their chemistry gets altered, and there is a huge element of the homosexual persuasion who incentivizes a certain activity among those guys. And I've had it explained to me. Can I do his voice? It is hard. It is hard out there sometimes,
Whose voice are you doing?
Oh, this rather dusky bodybuilder fellow who I've known. He's one of those guys.
Speaking of that,
he's kind of all right, but he's really into Alex Jones, and he has the lowest IQ conspiracy takes, but they're funny.
I'm not reading this. That's
oh no.
Sorry. Oh, I realized just laughing for 2 straight minutes is horrible podcasting. But that was pretty funny. Yeah, well, and you see this in the rumors around bodybuilding for a long time. Like the amount of guys who are basically turning tricks for like HGH because it is very expensive. I mean, that's always been around. The rumors surrounding Arnold and others exist. My favorite I mean, obviously, my favorite black bodybuilder is Ronnie Coleman, the funniest man on earth.
Of course.
Which there's a really funny. I can't remember who he was talking to. I might have been talking to Jay Cutler. I can't remember, another kind of bodybuilder from the era. But Coleman was infamous for working as a police officer during his bodybuilding run. And of course, he's an absolute insane physical specimen. Even among bodybuilders, was infamous for lifting very heavy. Part of the reason why he basically can't walk now. But there's a very funny clip of him talking about going to the police academy in like small town rural Texas and the physical requirements. And it was like all of these like very basic, like, how many push-ups can you do? How many pull-ups can you do? And then the last one was, how much can you move on a leg press? Which not only is Ronnie Coleman a giant jacked bodybuilder, but his lift was the leg press. Like there are videos of him and his bizarrely high-pitched voice, screaming like lightweight baby as he presses like 3,000 pounds. They're like absurd. And in this very laconic way, he's telling the story of this like old police chief, giving the new recruits their like physical test. And it's just this giant, like 6% body fat bodybuilder, just blowing the standards out of the water. And I can't do his voice. He's a very iconic high voice, but he's talking about, the leg press. He's like, I had them put every weight in that whole room on that. I moved it. I moved it all lightweight. It's just like the funniest clip ever. I genuinely, I'm obviously not a bodybuilder. It's a very gay sport, but Ronnie Coleman is one of like the top 3 funniest individuals on the planet. Like just a all around funny guy. Yeah. Then herb seasoning. Yeah. If you guys aren't familiar, just look up that phrase and you'll see this dude screaming it. Like,
buddy.
Like that was like a meme for like 20 years, like I feel like it still is.
The jovial black Texan is a type that is like, when those guys,
Well, if I think I might have told this story on air before. I had a somewhat similar friend at my first ever gym, which was a rec center in like a very depressed Appalachian town. And so for context, I've said this before, I used to be big, lost a good deal of weight, and just went straight like Auschwitz mode. So I dropped like 75 pounds by just not eating. So it's very, very skinny. I was like 150 pounds at 6 foot. And so I started going to the gym a couple years ago. And I was very, very scrawny, very weak. And at this gym, it was both a weight center and then just like a rec room. And it was right next to a home, like a day program for the intellectually disadvantaged, we'll say. And so they would let them out multiple times a day for gym time, which basically just means that they opened the door.
Milling about.
Not milling. Like running like rage zombies.
Oh,
like just like crawling on the walls, screaming, flailing on weight machines. And it would be like you could hear the doors open and just this like screeching noise.
Oh,
and, like,
no.
30 autists would just come like clambering like World War Z. And so odd environment. I almost stepped on a needle in the bathroom, but there was this one guy there. It was free, which is why I went. And I assume why everyone else went. And there was this guy. And like I said, I was 6 foot, 150 pounds, not moving a lot of weight. And this guy who was like, probably like, 6'4", 6'5", very big black guy, looks like he played football, like big, really, really strong, would wear these like neon colored singlets, like, like cut out everything.
Yeah.
And he had big headphones on and he'd get so just hyped up, like talking to himself the whole time. So it'd be a dead empty weight room. Imagine me, but 40 pounds lighter. This guy, maybe some, screaming autismos in the background, indeterminate. And he would, over the course of a set, like hype himself up. And then like right before he'd hit his like, his like biggest lift, he'd come over there and get me to count for him. He'd literally be like, how much that weigh? How much that weigh? Tell me how much that weigh. And at first I was kind of intimidated. I was like, because I was like, I'm going to be honest, this would not be a fight. Like I'd be just screwed. But I realized he was just getting himself so hyped up.
Yeah, yeah.
And he would like wanted me to be hyped up too.
He wants
Like,
you
he
to
was just a
validate.
big
Yeah,
fan.
yeah. Oh yeah.
And he was genuinely really nice because he'd do the same thing for me. But obviously, and this is, I'm talking like the first month or two I ever lifted weights, the numbers weren't that good. So
Sure.
he would be counting my weight and be like, yeah, baby, come on, you got it.
That
And
rocks.
it was just the funniest, like, odd couple pairing of the two people who worked out at 3 p.m. in this random rec center.
You know, that
I
is
don't
one
even know his name.
that is one thing I definitely I tire of the gym setting, but for the people who are intimidated to go to the gym, it's very rare for there to be people there who are like sneering at you. Like, I see it occasionally, very occasionally, and it is not accepted. Like, enthusiasm and like encouragement is the standard go-to in a gym.
Also, if you have never been to and obviously this is different, like a specialty, like weight dungeon, you know, the kind where it's like death metal music and no lights, different. Any commercial gym, however, your mental picture of what it looks like, not accurate. There were like 3 guys like that. Everyone else is, man,
Just
you forget about the left side of the bell curve.
Yes.
You will see them there.
Yes, you will.
It's the most baffling human behavior. I went to this one commercial gym in my town for a couple years before I swapped, and we're just a series of random characters who I just enjoyed watching. Like, the people watching was great. Like, there was this guy called Guile, because he looked like Guile from Street Fighter. He was this like 60-somethings guy, tall, jacked, like Tren, where it's like you have no skin almost. And he would exclusively work out in like an army green tank top, combat pants, and combat boots. So it was pretty funny. But then there was also this just America guy, and I think he got kicked out because the gym I used to go to was right next to a plasma donation place where you could like sell your plasma for heroin money. And so there was always just crazy stuff going on. And so occasionally we'd get people going in just trying to scam money off of people. And there was this guy who wore, and he looked like you know that meme Beetlejuice, the kind of like deformed looking guy.
Yeah.
Like, I think of him as like the origin of like the D's nut soundbite. He looked like that, but he wore top to bottom American flag paraphernalia, like a cowboy hat, a vest, everything. And he would come in wearing that, kind of like half-heartedly do some curls, and then once he was sure that no one was watching, just go around and ask for money. And is that irritating? Yes. Is it also kind of funny when he's dressed like a gay Captain America? Also, yes.
That's wonderful.
So I don't know. I kind of miss that part.
Yeah, but being able to go in and just work out and move on is nice as well. Once you've established kind of a repertoire.
All right. Sansat Chamali, which is a very funny Photoshop. Says it turns out those are different guys. Sorry about that. Oops. I don't know how I could have gotten confused there. I see we have another super chat from Herb Seasoning, which I don't know if I can read that. It is funny. I've never seen that. I have certainly heard stories.
Women
Anyway,
control their bladders is a thing, but it's almost like an Instagram fetish at this point, which is just horrifying. And I feel like that's what a lot of it is, you know.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, to that point, I've been off of normal person social media for a very long time. And one of the last times that I signed on to, Instagram or whatever, it was someone I kind of knew posting a video of that happening. I was like, you know what? I'm done. I never needed to see that.
Yeah.
I literally deleted my account like a week later. I was like, all right, there were some other things going on, but I was like, this is a sign from God. I don't need to be here. Don't do that. I feel like I don't need to say that. You should not be doing that. Whatever you were doing that led to that point, reassess. I don't know, man. People are this is one of many things, which is as it has become sort of massified, gym culture has gotten even worse. Like genuinely, just the worst. It's good for you. You should do it, but man, the people watching is fascinating. Anyway, I want to get back to that massive digression. And yes, Infernal, this is quality podcasting. But look, it's free, so take what you can get.
Now this is podcasting.
I need that soundbite. Now we live in the era of AI. Maybe I should complete my transformation into a daytime talk radio show.
Jaybird and Anakin. Now this is podcasting.
After a 45-minute digression about something not in the slightest bit related to what we're doing. Herb seasoning. I can't read these. You're making me laugh, but I cannot show these on air. So in all seriousness, right, this sort of ultimately defeatist attitude is I understand it because it is couched in an idea of fairness that is sort of integral to like the Anglo-American, right? We want the rules to be fair. We want things to be equally enforced. And look, even when that cultural idea, that standard of fairness was in the ascendancy, it was never perfect. Not is any human institution. But the problem is, much like ritualized combat, much like what we saw in Japan or in, Greece, other places where combat was sort of strictly regulated, it depends on both parties consenting to it. And once it's done, it's fully done, right? You need to outright win, and then you can set the baseline rules. But until you've achieved that hegemony, you can't dictate the terms. You can't make everyone agree. And ultimately, right, that is what power is, the ability to set the terms for politics, the ability to set the terms of the discussion. And to me, it's the same thing, and I might be overextending, Karl, but you see with the kind of like extreme peaceful parenting, which is the idea of if I simply treat my children as if they already were competent, capable adults, they will become that.
Yes.
And it's sort of this like cargo cult thinking where you've got the causality all backwards. And I think like many other things, is this a reasoned argument or is this simply what feels right to me? So yeah, I'm curious. Do you see the analogy I'm drawing there, Karl?
I do. Like, for example, with peaceful parenting, it should be a goal. Well, let me step back a little bit. If your decision is you're never going to like physically intervene at a certain level with a child, and assume this like deep understanding for them, that's one thing, and it's goofy. But if generally you're going to say, there might be a situation where I need to like physically intervene with my child to get their attention because it's the only way to get it at this point in time, and it'll be as minimal and like non-harmful. Like a swat on the back of the thigh is a revised tactic to just like get attention, but you have to do it in a certain way where it's not just you lashing out in anger, because that's really what you're trying to avoid. It isn't that like, something that could be classified as striking a child is always bad. What it is it's, if a child is doing something that is literally endangering themselves or their siblings or whatever over and over again, and they're of a certain age where the only way to get their attention is to do this, you still have to do it in a very systematic fashion, right? Like you're going to get a whipping, is one of those things where it's like, I've found that there is an extreme bell curve in the effectiveness of these techniques anyway, which is why I'm being so pedantic about like being very, very specific, because it just stops working very quickly after a certain point. And so, but if you go into it with my goal is I'm never going to like have the kind of confrontation with a child that might be necessary in a very specific circumstance, like we have to walk along a busy road, and the kid wants to keep running out into traffic, like these are totally different things, and you're losing the forest for the trees because you're saying my ideology is that I could never, ever, ever do this because it's abusive, or it's like a violation of their rights. And first of all, people don't have rights. Second, you have duties and privileges, and you have to like maintain and earn them to a certain degree. And yes, I understand that it isn't that way in our world, like legally, but we want to get to that point. And so we need to think that way. And we need to think in terms of like, what is the closest to getting us to this point? And, being a purist about quote unquote, I care about the Second Amendment, and he might need to defend himself at a protest that gets out of hand. He's an armed guy. He's an armed communist going onto federal property to prevent law enforcement from getting rid of people we need to get rid of. And he has that gun so that he can kill people if he's presented with the need to do so, kill federal officers or maybe even a chud. Because that's the kind of person he is. So you need to stop viewing these as abstract conceptual things that might also apply to you. Like they're going to get you anyway. And so just enforcing the rules against one of your enemies is not this big overstep.
Well, and similarly, there is a problem as well of sort of announcing your intentions. Like if you go into a conflict saying like, well, I certainly won't ever do that. I will never sink to this level.
Yes.
Well, you have just created a win button, right? Even if that's not something you would do, by preemptively announcing what is and what isn't off limits, you have incentivized someone to sink to a lower level, right? You need to keep that even as an implicit threat more than anything else. And look, again, I understand the inclination to limit the scope of the political, right? To strive for fairness. But to be honest, like we don't live in an era where we have the ability to enforce fairness. We only have the ability to affect our own people, right? We're not like, we don't have a hegemonic level of control. And so, well, if you were only able to enforce it to yourself, you are only limiting half of the parties, And again, I think a lot of it comes back to this idea of like inviolable natural rights, which look, man, I'm sorry, those just simply do not exist. We have traditional privileges, right? We have things that are understood as, we could say, the rights of a citizen. But again, those are contingent on actually being enforced. In DC, for example, you have a right to defend yourself with firearms. On paper, but do you in real life? And this is really an issue that sort of conservatives have writ large with the Constitution. The idea that, well, those are the rules of the game. It's like, yeah, sure. Well, those are the rules as printed in the rule book, right? The Dungeons Master's Guide, if you will. But guess what, bud? We've been using homebrew rules for a long time.
Yeah.
We're in charge of this thing. And, you can point to those until you're blue in the face, right? You can run into a burning building with the architect's plans and say, well, this isn't how it's supposed to be. But again, don't quote the law to men who carry swords. And I think that that's another kind of continual frustrating thing, which is like, look, like you can like the Constitution, you can like the rules of the game, but those are not the rules under which we are playing. They're not the rules that we currently operate under. And so again, right, acting as if your desired end state is already here, right? I will simply act as if the Constitution was the highest will of the land. That will not bring that situation into being. It's wishful thinking. QWERTY ZZZ7 for Canadian $5, longtime viewer, first time super chatter. When did you get good looking? Let me tell you, man, everything is cheaper in Turkey. Not only can you get a bargain bin 1911 for a third of the price, but plastic surgery, I'm telling you, it's worth it, man. You can get a BBL for like $1,400. Not going to comment on that, but if things get a little desperate, maybe that comes into play. Point is, go to Turkey. Hair plugs. Like I got the whole I got the whole treatment. Anyway, sorry, that was a horrible thing to admit on the internet.
So Jay, here's another dumb thing I saw on the internet that reinforces what we're talking about here. And it's that whole people of different parties being like, oh, you don't believe in free speech and that crap. So like Zoran Mamdani posts on Twitter, like flipping the bird, wearing rubber gloves, and interestingly, flipping off a statue of Christopher Columbus. Michael Knowles does a quote post and says, deport him. And then Brad Palumbo, like libtard, does a quote post, deport Michael Knowles, send him to Iran since he loves theocracy and hates free speech. You know, it's like, that has nothing to do with free speech. The issue is that here's a foreign interloper who hates us and our culture. That's the problem. And to pretend otherwise is hilarious, that there's some abstraction. And so it's like, it's these enemies trying to define what the rules are that everyone has to play by, right? Instead of just, you know, my principle is what's good for me and my people, right? Which is the only principle you should really have. You know, there are ethical principles for how you do that, you know, and those can be rather loose in some areas, which is normal and good. But that's what principles are. They're not these abstractions that we've been fooled into believing. And again, as you pointed out, through this, like, you know, Anglo normalcy mindset that, like, if we're all on the same team and we're just debating minutia, you can have a good faith argument. But when, you know, that's not the case, it's bad faith. And so you need to always maintain that thinking when it comes to dealing with anything. There's no abstraction where there isn't friend, enemy, good faith, bad faith. You know, you have to make those decisions immediately when you talk about anything.
Yeah, and that's a valid point, right? That yeah, I don't know. It's incredibly frustrating to see our people kind of fall for this, because, like, again, it's understandable from certain premises, but, like, look, man, like, how much conservative losing can you take, you know, before you start to look around for an alternative solution? It's like, look, man, like I said, we mentioned the two biggest areas of, you know, conservative wins, right, are 2A stuff, which I think there has been some legitimate wins there, and then abortion, kind of. Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, even that is significantly worse than it was, you know, pre-Roe, but it's better than it could have been, right? So, okay, we'll take that as sort of a tactical win, you know, not an ultimate one. And it's frustrating because when I look at these people, it's like, they're my people. I want them to win. Those are the people for whom I care about. And if you said, hey, you know, would you be happy to, you know, for those people to win, you might have to personally, morally compromise yourself a little bit. Well, quite literally, that is what leadership is, right? That is the cost of leadership. Yeah. You know, Calvin even talks about this, you know, in Institutes, where he's basically saying, like, look, like the leader must do things that would damn an ordinary man, and he must rely on the grace of God to save him. You know, a prince, a magistrate must condemn a man to die. He must do things that are illegitimate for any normal individual to do. And in a way, this is ultimately a shared false premise with, I mean, you could honestly say anyone within the kind of Nuremberg regime system, which is that states can be judged on the same sort of moral axis that an individual can. You can charge a state with a crime, which is sort of a bizarre thing to say. And look, I'm not a mindless statist, you know, someone who believes, you know, simply worships power. But to say, like, well, of course, you know, power and the state can do things that it would be rude or illegitimate for you or I to do. That is why it exists, right? It is an inability to solve those sort of like non-standard issues. And again, this is the ideology of the loser, right? The idea that you can limit the government can limit itself. Clearly, that is a fiction. It is not only from a game theoretical perspective just stupid, but it hasn't worked, right? How have our three branches of government limited? I don't know if you've realized, Karl, but the government is slightly bigger than it was in the 1780s.
Slightly bigger.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know.
I was gonna say, so I considered myself, like, I softly considered myself ideologically a libertarian for way too long, and what I blame is, well, myself. But in the early internet days, it was really easy to do that, because when you looked at the political landscape, you have like the Zionist neocons, right, and then you have the conservatards, and then you have on the Democratic Party side, like, and all the socialist ridiculousness. So you're like, oh, well, this is pretty reasonable, and it gets me out of making these moral judgments, and like I can neutralize that, well, you're actually a bad guy. No, you go, haha, I'm actually a good guy. I don't participate in this sort of a thing. That was really the way a lot of people were using it, and frankly, when I realized that I was doing that myself, I found that loathsome and gay, and so I stopped doing it. But anyway, the reason I mention that is, if you read, a lot of the early libertarian thought, or the more highly evolved arguments, like Hans Hermann Hoppe, for example, who is not half Asian. There, sorry. Anyway, the what you get at is Hoppe goes through, here's a libertarian society, and what it really is feudalism. It's self-selecting forms of feudalism. And at what point does it become a state? At what point does this happening cross all these boundaries? And so, for example, I lived in a very small HOA that we could not get rid of. It was literally one street with like 10 houses, and we couldn't get rid of it until a certain period in the future, because of the laws in the county that we were in. And we kind of wanted to, but the advantage of keeping it in place is that you get a little more say in like how often you can decide how often your street is resurfaced, right? Because you're paying for it. You can maintain certain areas. You can turn an area into a park, or if you really want to save money and you try to get the county or the city to take a strip of land that has trees on it, because you don't want to have a very small amount of money for insurance and all these stupid little things like that. But what happened was, your neighbors would think it was pointless. They didn't want to pay this money. But then they would come to the HOA president and complain about people. And I learned a great deal about the way government actually works in doing this. Like, at what point am I doing this because I'm drunk on power, or I'm doing this because like I'd rather not call the sheriff's department on someone. So I'm walking over there with some papers, and what it is it's the way that you kind of frame it. Right, the difference. So like, I had a thing where I went over to a guy and I was like, look, you're filling our very narrow small street with cars and blocking people's way in and out of this very busy road, where everyone, the speed limit is 40 here, but people do like 60 down this hairpin turn. And like, my wife and kids almost got rear-ended by someone doing like 60 miles an hour, because these idiots were parking and like filling up the road. So like, you couldn't even pull onto our street. And so I went over there with this a printout of the county rules and handed it to them. I did yell at the guy because he was basically being of questionable sexual orientation in the way that he engaged with me, and pissy. And then his daddy, who owned the house, called me and was like, I think you're tripping on power because you're the HOA president. And I was like, what? I didn't present myself to him that way whatsoever. Someone else in the HOA wrote a letter about this situation, framing it as like, you have to do what we say because we're the leaders of the HOA. And I was like, what are you doing? What is wrong with you? So look at it this way, like, at what point is that a government? Like, we're governing the way things behave here, and people are coming to me and asking me, and that's the origin of all state power, right? It's an evolution of people resolving these things by going to people to mediate them, or just taking stuff, or five guys rolling up and saying, hey, you're a kid toucher, you're not allowed in our town, if you come back here, we're going to break your legs, right? Or do what, or no one will hear from you ever again, right? At what point is that government, right? Like, at what point does that cross the line? And there's a lot of theory about the topic of government and why it's bad and why it's good, but at a certain point, it just becomes like, I don't like it, and you're doing it, therefore it's government, and you're a statist. And it's like, no, like you pointed out, like, there are things that need to be done, and the state, a properly ordered state is the best way for us to get to that. And this ain't it, but it's also not automatically bad because it's the state. That delusion is over, and your enemies are using that delusion to manipulate you and destroy you, and to neutralize you and to sweep you off the playing field. So, like, you really need to think carefully about, like, which of these things are what.
Sorry, I completely muted myself. Yeah, there is something to that, right? The idea that any government I don't like is statism. And also, look, man, like, literally any sort of man is the political animal. This is what we do. It's how problems are solved. And sorry, you can't really get away from that, right? The lefties that say like everything is political, it's like, well, they're right and they're wrong. Now, what you can do, as we've said multiple times, is like set the acceptable scope of disagreement, right? Sort of create a walled garden for politics where it does and does not apply. But this is simply like the state of how it's how things happen. And even HOAs, it's sort of like it's like a legally legitimized version of how neighbors have always worked.
Yeah, exactly. We built
so, like,
the road, so we need to take care of the road.
Right. It's like a formalized version of, something which may have existed in other contexts. And yeah, sure, they're annoying. And in an ideal world, you wouldn't need them. But, to sort of get out on a Hoppian limb here, it's like, well, you need HOAs because you can't do things which would shield you from the need for an HOA. Exactly. If you see it, if you pick up what I'm putting down there.
So this was a kind of light example. The stronger example was a guy turning his very tiny front yard into a used car lot. I'm not kidding. And totally against the rules. And there were it was enforceable. And my point was like, look, do you want to fight? Do you want to just deal with it? Do you want financial penalties to build up that will win in court, which I'd rather not do? Do you want the county to come after you for running an off-books business and violating all of these rules? Or do you just want to like stop doing it? And so he stopped doing it. And I was like, look, I don't care if you're selling a car that's in your garage. I don't care if you're selling cars from your house, but you can't fill this narrow road with used cars and have them parked on your lawn. Like, that's just the rule. I don't care if you park your car on your lawn to work on it in an afternoon. That's fine. All of these things, and then someone will be like, you can't make that decision. It's not your decision to make anyway. It's like, sorry, it is. Because my kids are in this neighborhood, and the kind of people that are coming to buy a used car from this guy in the parking on our street, I don't want them on my street. And fill in whatever ethno-sectarian associations you want to make there, you're probably going to be pretty close to what I'm talking about. We just don't need that, and we don't need dudes like working on cars in their front yard, like revving the engine at 2 a.m. either. We don't need like preppies in a pyramid scheme parking on our street, filling the street so that people who live there can't even park their car in front of their house, and talking at 11 p.m. when the exhausted parents are trying to sleep. But because we live in a tiny house in a tiny neighborhood with a tiny front yard, we can't, because of these knuckleheads talking out there. Like, rules are good, and you, by living in a community that has rules that you want to comply with, that you like that's wonderful, and that's where we need to be going. If you want to live in a place with no rules, be my guest. And maybe you can, if you have property out in where you're not bothering anyone else, none of these rules apply to you because you're not living on top of each other, right? It's so there's no, this isn't an ideology. It's you're fucking bothering me. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And it's normal to have these responses.
Well, certainly. And that's what's so irritating about it, is that you're sort of using ideology to mask, or to sort of dissuade people from a very normal human interaction, where it's like, well, does it violate the NAP? And it's like, dude, I don't care.
I will violate the NAP right now with someone who's violating it against me by me making me look at them.
Well, I mean, this is maybe more relevant to me, but John Gora is saying, what about year-long yard sales? I have one of these, like a block down from me. There's just literally year-long yard sale. Nothing has changed hands. It is just a bunch of junk in the yard with price tags affixed to it. Point is, incredibly irritating. We do have one more super chat. Right, did I miss that? Oh, I thought we had another one. Oh yeah. Here it is. By the dreaded Herb Seasoning. A bearded Gen X guy in a grunt style shirt pretending to be Doc Holliday said to me, Jadon Quavante is just as based if he likes 2A and free speech.
All I care is that they like guns. Yeah, that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah, and look, dude, I like guns a lot. It's my autism, and I get to pick the fixation. But that said, it's that's a very poor way to organize a society. Society is more than just you and your hobbies. Running all of society just so you can have access to the tastiest food from across the planet has clearly led to a bad society. Go to, I don't know, literally any city in America. Right. So it is this kind of very sloppy, unbounded thinking, right? Which is the thing that would make that sort of my pet issue is the defining in or out for, an entire civilization. I mean, obviously, look, these people aren't, and I don't want to put words in whoever that guy's mouth is, but it's I'm going to go ahead and say that these probably aren't our deepest thinkers. But still, it's stupid, and I hate to see people fall into it. So, Karl, we're coming up on time. Thank you for yet again coming on my Wednesday live show, where we only have the most serious conversations with a very stupid conversation about bodybuilding sort of sandwiched in between the two of both halves. But dude, where can people find you?
The best place to find me is my Substack, which is karldahl.substack.com. That's KarlDahl.substack.com. I try to put my podcast appearances up on there in a diligent fashion, but I also have lots of effort posts and articles, and I'm working on something really cool right now. I have a correspondent in Spain, a friend in Spain, who he wrote a piece after the murder of Charlie Kirk talking about the comparisons to Jose Calvo Sotelo in the lead up to the Spanish Civil War, a very pivotal moment. and he's written another piece that I'm editing right now that I'll be posting, which is kind of a history of Calvo Sotelo and his position in the right political sphere. And it's really interesting. As Jay knows, and people who are familiar with me know, the Spanish Civil War is, again, it's not, history doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes. Like, we are in a very similar position to Spain, unless we can, steer our way out of it. So thanks, man.
Of course. I really enjoy the opportunity to speak with you. Check out Karl's book. Check out his Substack. Both are quite good.
Oh, yes,
as far as my
book.
stuff, yeah, please buy book. Check the link in the description for that. As far as my stuff, most of my episodes are better than this. So if you're interested in episodes that are better than this, you can find me on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you want to listen to podcasts. If you want to support me, the best way to do so is to head over to Patreon, Substack, or Gumroad, where you get episodes early and ad-free. It helps me out. This is what I do. I appreciate it. Or you can head over to Axios Remote Fitness Coaching. JD is a friend of both Karl and I's, and he does good work. So if you want to be strong, if you want to have the opportunity to see people in athleisure doing questionable things, well, Axios Remote Fitness Coaching can make it better. Check out links in the description.